the key thing between happy and unhappy, University of Chicago study found, is marriage.
Dr. Jenet Erickson.
Jenet Erickson with us.
Jacob Erickson.
My PhD's in family science.
Research featured in the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal.
I'm going to talk about something difficult right here at the beginning. We're seeing a closing of the American heart, a drop in the marriage rate of over 60%. It's hard to date today. It's a hookup culture where you're symbolizing union but not experiencing union, and it's linked to an increase in loneliness. People are awakening to a reality that in many cases there's been a denial of. There is something we cannot ignore. Children are more likely to thrive when they have two parents married who are committed to them.
The fact that 1 in 4 kids in the U.S. is being raised in a one-parent home more than in any other country in the world is not good for U.S. kids.
You said 2 parents, right?
Yep.
Is it significant that it's a mother and a father, or does it matter?
There's a really important caveat there, and that is that 75-year Harvard grant study.
Oh, yeah.
You know this study.
Yeah.
Most famous study, probably one of them,
Yeah.
because it follows the same group of people for 75 years. And the question was, what is it that leads to flourishing, to human well-being? What is it across the life course that shapes quality of relationships and people earning? And these are all Harvard students. They obviously had reached some threshold of intellectual capacity. And so what was going to shape their lives? At the end of the 75 years, the principal investigator concludes it by saying, happiness is love, full stop.
Whoa.
And he said, no one expected it when we started this study out. No one was sort of looking at relationships. It was 1937 or 38. And what came out was that the quality of our relationships, beginning in early life, family relationships, mean everything for human well-being, development, flourishing, happiness. Happiness is love. When I was young, I had an experience living in Mexico with my family, and I decided I want to be a humanitarian nurse. I thought that is the coolest thing, people going around helping other people with health. So I studied nursing when I got into BYU, and I was set to do that. I realized during it that I was not going to be a good nurse and I might kill people instead of help them live, just the way that my brain operated.
Really?
And so I finished my degree. I worked as a nurse for a year, and at the same time I started studying how to teach English to speakers of other languages, which we call linguistics TESOL. And I ended up teaching ESL at BYU to foreign students who came from all over the world to learn English and hopefully be admitted to university in the United States. Then I taught in China. I did work other places
Really?
teaching. And in the midst of that, someone called me and said, my grandmother's providing funding for a conference on the family at the United Nations in Geneva, Switzerland. And she said, do you want to go? And I was like, do I want to go to Geneva, Switzerland? Of course, right?
That's the most beautiful place. Yeah, it's so beautiful.
Yeah, so I go to this conference, and I'm sitting there in the UN buildings as a young adult, and I'm hearing from people all over the world about family as the core of economic thriving, as the core of individual development, really as the fundamental unit, we would say, of societal wealth and health. And I'm listening just amazed and reflecting at my own experiences as a nurse and caring for children. I was a pediatric nurse. And what it meant to have them heal and be well was fully dependent on that family environment that they came from. I'd also realized as a student teaching English that we could tell right off that a child comes to school in kindergarten already, in a sense, on a trajectory for learning.
Whoa.
Or not. And it is grounded in the family core that they come from. Were they read to? Did they have books? Did they have people talk to them and engage in conversations with them? Was there trauma? Was there difficulty? And that shaped their capacity to learn even another language. And so as I'm thinking there in that United Nations building, it was so clear to me, there is nothing like these core relationships that we call family. There's nothing more important to human thriving. I leave the conference. My dad says, after I finished my teaching term at BYU, says, I think you should get a PhD. I said, I do not want to get a PhD. I knew what that was like, the amount of work it was. I was not interested. I just wanted to get married. And my siblings I'm one of 11 siblings. Everyone was getting married. I'm like, that's what I want. I just want to be married and a mom. It was not in the cards. All the doors were slamming closed.
Are you serious?
But this beautiful opportunity to pursue a PhD in family was made possible, and it felt very guided by God. So I ended up pursuing a PhD and then coming back to teach at BYU. And I should just say, Stephen, that as I'm studying all of these things as a student and a graduate student and prior to that, I couldn't help but think, like, the kindest thing I could do to love my brothers and sisters in this world is help them know the truths I'm learning about the importance of these core relationships. So as I'm studying all this stuff and hearing, there was no question, we are deeply relational human beings, meaning we need relationships to thrive. We need them to be strong and healthy. To illustrate it, I have a wonderful family member whose parents told him they were getting divorced. He is 10. The divorce will be a blessing in his life, in the sense that it will take him out of an abusive environment. Nonetheless, that night, as a little boy, he's writing in his journal after his parents. He writes in his journal every Sunday night. He had his journal out. He drew a picture of a heart broken down the middle. On one side, he wrote mom. On the other side, he wrote dad. And of course, we all know whose heart it is.
It's his heart.
It's his own heart. And on the outside of the heart, he had these questions. Where do I go? Who am I? Whoa. These huge existential identity questions. And at the bottom, in his best cursive, he pulled out his very best cursive, he wrote, how it should be. And had another heart, mom, dad, me, all bound together. Hooray, it said. So it's so illustrative. I thought, how remarkable that he drew what research shows, which is even when divorce is the best option for a family, we cannot deny that we belong to one another. We are bound up in one another. And so when there's a tearing and a shredding, we feel that tearing and shredding. This little boy is the embodiment. He's the physical body of the union of his parents.
Whoa, that is so deep. It's so true, though, right?
It's so true.
He is the outcome.
He is the outcome.
That embodiment.
Yes. And they are stamped. Their union is stamped on his very being. Wow. And so when there's a breaking, right, it's within himself. It's why my husband would say his parents divorced when he was 6. And he remembers his mom saying to him, Michael, who do you want to live with?
A 6-year-old making
a 6-year-old.
Yeah.
And he's an only child. So he who can talk a lot said at that moment, I could not respond. I couldn't answer. How would I choose? How would I choose between them when I am their union? So he says, as a young adult going to college, and he had a relatively healthy divorce experience in the sense that he was close to both of his parents. There was not conflict between them, all gifts in that difficulty. Nonetheless, he said as a young adult, he would have this question come into his mind. If they were not meant to be, was I meant to be?
Wow.
So it helps us
Just
see
a natural struggle,
yes,
friction in within.
Yes, in sense of identity because of that. And I love, Stephen, you know Carrie Muhlstein, one of his wonderful scholars. Carrie is a colleague, and he's done extensive work on the Abrahamic covenant.
Oh, yeah.
Right,
God prevails.
beautiful insight. Yes. Yeah. I love how he'll say his favorite show is Relative Race.
Oh.
On BYU TV, where someone finds someone in their family that they either haven't ever known or had lost at some point. And the feelings, the depth of poignant feelings to find this person who is part of you.
Yeah. It's like becoming whole again.
It's becoming whole again, which is why when we talk about God, a father, and God, a mother, and we are their literal children, it's not, as we talked about before, it's not like they are just nice people and they love us because they're nice people. They love us because we are in them and they in us, literally.
Naturally.
Naturally. physically, like in the sense that like the spiritual reality of that is literal. And that means we are all bound together too.
That's right.
As brothers and sisters.
That's right.
A literal.
The whole family.
The whole family. And so that work of binding us all together, which is the work of Christ, the sealing of the entire family, is so fundamental to our being whole.
That's what that Moroni said to Joseph Smith. At the
You
very
are
beginning
exactly right.
of the Doctrine and Covenants. I feel like this is where we're going.
Yep.
He's which was the first revelation, and he says basically to him, if it were not so,
Yes.
and he shall plant in the hearts of the children the promises made to the fathers,
And
the parents, and the hearts of the children shall turn to their fathers. If it were not so, the whole earth would be utterly wasted at his coming. Right?
And that verse is in every book of Scripture. It is the one verse that is in every single verse of Scripture. We hear it at the very beginning of the New Testament. We hear it in the Old Testament, in Malachi. We hear it in the Doctrine and Covenants. We hear it in Joseph Smith's history, right? It is in every book of Scripture because this is the work of God, the binding of the human family through sealing ordinance, which means mother and father and children, through which the power of the atonement flows, binding us all together as the eternal family.
Wow. This is so profound. I just love the connection that you've made just from your early childhood, right? You thought you were going to go into nursing.
Yeah.
But then you realized that you might kill some people.
Spare people's
their
lives.
Yeah, but I feel like that technicalness of the research kind of has helped you.
You are right, Stephen. Huge.
Yeah, you can see how God has prepared you for this important work that you're doing now.
That background was really important.
It's led you to really, all the research that you did with these different forums and that you naturally came to this desire to really go deeper on this topic.
Yes. I think a really important part of that yearning to be in deep connection with another soul, to have my own children, those were very real yearnings. Now, what's ironic is once I had children, the precious gift that I'd anticipated, marriage and children, my husband I'd wake up in the middle of the night and he would tease me about this because I'd wake up and I'd be like, what was I teaching students before I became a mother? I didn't know anything.
Yeah.
And,
how could I have been teaching this at all?
Yes, I'm sure I was botching it because the real experience, right, is so important.
And it's different.
And it is different. And I could see how weak I was, how pathetic sometimes my love actually was, even though I assumed, of course, I'll love these children. But I could see how false it could be sometimes. And so humbling to actually have that journey and to see how really all of us, it's just real. There's no perfect family. There's no perfect marriage. There's no perfect person.
At all,
anywhere. And that God's work is helping us be refined, be changed, grow through this beautiful process of being in deep connection with one another, where we can't go anywhere else. I can't run away from those little people, right?
No.
And it requires us to learn and grow and figure out what it means to truly love.
Yeah, I love something that I've, just in research, preparing for this, you quoted someone, I can't remember who you quoted, but the idea of like one of the biggest fears, the carnal fears that we have is separation.
Yes.
And we live in a world now where, when it comes to family, it's it's all over the place, right?
Yes.
And even the fact to even bring up the idea, right, that marriage is between a man and a woman, right? It's like, no way, because there's so many deep wounds.
Yes.
There's so many deep disconnections.
Yes.
There's so many examples of abuse, of trauma, of divorce, of
all of
single.
us have known some hurt, right?
Yeah.
In those relationships.
Well, even in the current circumstance, right?
Yes.
With the world, the divorce rate, I don't know the numbers. You know better than me, probably. What are some of the numbers that you see that really show this?
During when my husband's parents divorced, maybe when yours did, really strong increase in it across the 1980s. It's dropped since then, but stayed at like 41%.
Okay.
And what we have seen during that time is a huge increase in out-of-wedlock childbearing, so children being born outside the bond of marriage, where you might have nearly half of children being born outside of marriage itself, which is huge. And in some segments of the population, it's higher than that. But our crisis right now is a drop in the marriage rate of over 60%. So we live at a time when we might anticipate a third of people not marrying and having children.
A third of people not marrying.
A third of people, of our young adults today, not marrying and having children. So it's a big deal, right? This what you're describing, family as we have understood it, this core relationship beginning with marriage in a deeply bound unity, is not going to be the experience of many people. And it's linked to an increase in loneliness. So Peltzman, University of Chicago study just a few months ago found that the discriminating factor in happiness in the United States, so between happy and unhappy, is marriage.
Really?
Not economics, not other things that we might, not education, not socioeconomic status. The key thing is marriage.
And there's a lot of connection to other...
It's very strongly connected to a lot of outcomes, well-being outcomes.
Okay.
But happiness being one of them. And so when people are happily married, it's more than 500% more likely that they will be very happy. When they're in a very happy marriage, they will be very happy.
Wow.
And so I think all that just illustrates two things. One is what one of my favorite professors will say, we're seeing a closing of the American heart, a turning away from relationships, marriage, a turning away from children, the fertility rate dropping. And the implications for us as human beings are profound because nothing can replace that in building identity, meaning, connection to something bigger than oneself. And so it's an interesting time to live. And I think, like you said, there's like fear, there's woundedness. Mm-hmm. People experience the divorce revolution. It's hard to date today. They don't have a roadmap for getting into relationships.
Because the parents, they never saw it. Is that what you're saying?
They never see it. And courtship, because sex ended up being broken apart from marriage.
That's right.
Then the roadmap, that sexual intimacy, reserving that for marriage, it provided a roadmap, in a sense, for courtship. That's all gone. And so it's a hookup culture often, right? Where you're symbolizing union, but not experiencing union. And that leads to more fracturing. And then there's like, maybe this is an unsafe thing altogether.
So then fear, avoidance.
Yes.
And then more loneliness.
And more loneliness, perpetuating more loneliness. That's right. And I think that's what we're living through in that closing of the American heart.
Closing of the American heart, that's such an interesting perspective of looking at it that way, of like, even from that picture that you illustrated with the young boy, right?
Yes.
His parents are both separated, and this just creates this divide in us. And I don't care who you are.
Yeah.
Like, you obviously want an ideal family. Yeah. Or to be connected somehow. My dad, for example, he didn't know his dad till he was 16, and I know that affected him.
Yes.
Right? Like,
yes.
This is the way he described it to me. He said, I heard rumors that might have been my dad. Can you imagine?
Wow.
Right?
Seeing somebody and thinking, maybe that's my dad.
Yeah.
Wow.
Can you imagine what it does to your psyche? Can you imagine what it does to your sense of belonging, to your sense of connection?
Yes.
But I think that, even though that is the case, that there are these fragments, there are all of these effects.
Yes.
I think it's almost like, can we like put a plug in, right? Yeah. For like the traditional family to some degree? And it almost seems like that phrase could be weaponized.
Yes.
Almost. Why do you feel like, we've already mentioned it to a degree already, why do you feel like your research on the development, how important it is for a child to have both a mother and a father present, and how impactful that is on the child? Why do you feel like that is relevant today?
Yeah, so big. So I'll just tell you, very interesting. This, of all the times that I've been a student of any of this and a scholar and participating, people are awakening to a reality that in many cases there's been a denial of. And what it is, it was captured very well in a liberal thinker, scholar, Melissa Kearney, released her book called The Two-Parent Privilege just a few months ago.
Really?
It was shaking to the elite writers culturally, because all of her economic research said there is something we cannot ignore, and it is that children are more likely to thrive by leaps and bounds when they have two parents married who are committed to them. And it's going to show up in their economic well-being. It's going to show up in their emotional well-being, in their level of achievement. And so what she was showing is that when you have that fracturing, it's like a cycle that goes downward. So they don't experience the benefit of two parents. they are more likely not to create a married family themselves. And it spirals downward. It also goes the other direction. So when you come from married parents who have an intact and stable relationship, then what it facilitates is your own development, more likely to go to college, more likely to obtain a professional experience that's helpful economically, and then to establish the same kind of family. So it spirals upward or downward. And so she just said, we talk about class divide, the growing class divide in America. At its root, it is about marriage. It's about two parents. So what's interesting for me is now at this time to be able to talk about this when we are awakening those on the left, those on the right, those in the middle, to this reality that's undeniable. Human beings need the strength of stable marriages for flourishing in society.
But your distinction that I would say that is important to consider is it's the research that you've done is it being the importance of the development on the child for the to be a father and a mother, right? Because I know that you could say there's a lot of different ways of doing this.
Yes.
Right? And obviously this would be the ideal.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
What would you say are some of the, I think that there's both challenges.
Yeah.
Like, we think of the ideal and think, I'm never going to make it to that. My parents were divorced. My mom died, right?
Yeah.
There's situations that are like that.
Yeah.
How do you connect that together?
Yeah. Okay.
Because you said two parents, right?
Yep.
Now, is it significant that it's a mother and a father, or does it matter?
Yes. Okay. And we want to get into that because she was careful. This scholar was careful, right? Calling it two parents. But there's a really important caveat there. And that is that no institution that we have, and we're going to call marriage an institution, mother, father, children, creates a situation where two adults are willing and desirous to devote their time, talents, money, everything they are to the development of others. Nothing does that like marriage. Mother, father, biological connections to children. Okay, so we're going to come back to this.
Okay.
Because whenever I start talking about this, we have to say right off, there is no perfect family.
Yeah.
You may have come from stable marriage. That's a profound gift. But it does not mean it was not with, it didn't have conflict.
There's no way.
Yeah, there's no way, right? And so every single one of my students, some more than others, are no pain from their experiences. So I start out every class by reminding them of that beautiful line in the proclamation that says, every one of us belongs to a perfect family.
That's right.
Each of us is a beloved spirit-centered daughter of heavenly parents, and as such, each has a divine nature and destiny. I will fail my children every day in some way.
Yeah.
And it gives me so much peace to be able to tell them, I will fail you. You have parents who will never fail you, who never leave you, who are perfect and perfectly devoted. And they love you so much, they sent their son to provide redemption for me and for you. And he will do that. So I think right at the outset, every one of us are part of a perfect family of perfect parents. And in mortality, we're going to experience fracturing, rupture. We will love very imperfectly. We will be loved very imperfectly. We will have mortal experiences that are deeply painful in family relationships. That will be the most painful part of our lives, no question.
That's where it hurts the most.
It is where it hurts the most.
Yeah.
And that is inherent to mortality, which I love. I love that kintsugi practice in Japan, where they have these wonderful rituals using pottery in their tea rituals that are daily or, their special festivals. And sometimes that pottery, those bowls and dishes are passed on generation to generation, but they will be broken. And kintsugi says, you repair it not to look as it did before, but by piecing it together with gold lacquer.
Oh, yeah.
You've seen it.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
It's so beautiful.
Yeah.
And sometimes they don't even repair it until the next generation. Almost like the healing happens in the next generation of these things that have been passed on, Your life is a beautiful example of that, Stephen.
Yeah.
But I think all of us, in a sense, Christ is the golden lacquer that weaves his life and grace and power in our brokenness. And we are more valuable after than we were before.
So there's definitely an ideal that we need to consider.
Yes.
But we can't forget that part of the ideal includes the Redeemer.
Yeah. Oh, I love how you said that.
Right?
Because we experience broken. There are real effects.
There's no
right?
question.
There's no question. And there are real effects when we don't have solid marriages, when we have brokenness that way. There are real effects. We can't deny those. My husband would say, right, it's tempting when you've experienced divorce. You, like any of us, want to say, I'm not any different than anybody else.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I'm no different. I belong. Right?
You don't want that separation.
You don't want that separation. You don't want to have stigma. We can be stigmatizing of people. He'll describe trying to date. He's a convert to the church. As a 21-year-old, he's trying to date. And he said, I had the sense that I was marked because of the divorce of my parents. And I wasn't sure I could have someone who didn't have, right?
You're destined to be the opposite of what the ideal
You're
would be.
exactly right. That's
People
how he felt.
sincerely feel this way.
That sense of destiny. And so powerful for him to bear witness to me, even watching his own life unfold, marrying me, having his own children, of the power of the Lord Jesus Christ that is infinite to heal and bless. None of us fall outside that plan. None of us are destined. Don't you love Elder Kieran's powerful talk?
Oh, yeah. An endless pursuit.
Just so
Yeah,
right?
relentless pursuit.
He is in relentless pursuit of each of us. There is no barricade. He has not designed our lives with barricades to prevent us from finding him, but they become, those barricades actually become channels to know his redemption, as you said.
Yeah.
Right? This great story of redemption.
Well, I just mean that the family is where you have the greatest joys and the hardest pains, because you can't be betrayal in your family. You're betrayed by someone.
Yes.
It's hard to be betrayed by someone that you don't really know that well, but when you know them and they know everything about you, it hurts more deeply.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Because it's so tied to our identity.
Yes.
So tied to everything that's a part of us.
And what's so amazing, right? You are exactly right. I think about like family pain. We all know that. You can't even think about anything else.
Yeah.
Right? There's conflict or that feeling of betrayal, which is real, by people who know you and can hurt you because you are vulnerable in their knowing you so well. And so that pain is absolutely real. And so you realize, wow, what it means to have a Savior whose whole work is to bring at-one-ment, is to bring healing, is to offer deliverance and redemption, right? Deliverance from the pain and the sorrow, and a redemption that transforms it into something good.
I love that example of the bowl, that motif, right? That example of, let's make it clear, it's going to be broken.
Yes.
And we know that he's the one that's going to mend it.
Yes.
When it comes to this pursuit of the ideal,
Yes.
what are some of the misconceptions that we have?
Yes.
We've talked about a few already. What are some that you can think of?
Yeah, so important to think about that. It seems like my students, right, there's that fear that I can't have that. We live at a time when there's this individualistic orientation, right? This shift, like,
I'm going to do me.
You do you, I'm going to do me.
Yeah.
And I got to make sure I control my own happiness, right? My own pleasure. And that I'll have students all the time say, I've gotten married, they find someone wonderful. I'm terrified to have kids. Will I lose myself in giving my life to another? Wow. And that messaging is so powerful in our culture.
That's the assumption that if I do have kids,
yes,
then I'll lose myself.
I will lose myself. So like we've been put into this culture where it's a pitting between ourselves and those we love, right? And trying to keep yourself or those that you might bear or marry. And so it's trying to protect myself from being taken by others. And I think when we have that framing, what we've lost is that we find the most meaning when we are irreplaceable in the lives of those we love. Like to have a baby and not to take that lightly. It's a huge thing. Yeah. And for women in particular, right? There's significant realities to that. Significant sacrifice. But I'll tell them, when you choose that, it's not, it won't have the power it has if we just fall into roles, right? If I just kind of collapse into a role. We can have that sense of, oh, marriage is going to give me a life, and a man, I'm going to make him feel like a hero, and he'll give me a life that's stable and secure. I'll kind of go underneath that, and I'll have a life. 5 years into it, there's resentment and not a sense of having chosen the sacrifice, right? But when we choose, when we see the power and gift to have a baby who bears your image in them, to be their whole world, that infant, you are their whole world. And to have the privilege of being that person in another person's life and development is nothing compares.
Yeah.
And when we choose it, when we choose what it means to sacrifice and give, the power that it means in our lives and theirs, there just isn't anything that compares to
It's
that.
hard to describe. It's
It is-
hard.
It's impossible.
It's like with somebody that I know, and I mean, I think that there are people who have yet to have this experience that might be thinking, well, I haven't had that happen yet.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
We do know, and I don't want to downplay it. I don't want to dilute it.
Yes.
That God is, the promises that God gives us, especially covenantal promises,
Yes.
they will come to pass.
Yes.
And it's not a short-term perspective.
Yes.
I just want to just add a witness from my own personal experience.
Yes.
That somebody could have told me, my friend, he's like, when you have a child,
Yeah.
it'll be like this. You won't get it now, but when you know, you'll know.
Yeah.
And when my first son was born, I'm telling you, it is, I can't even describe it, of the love that I could feel
Yes.
for him. And it naturally, automatically made me think, oh my gosh, I can't even imagine how much God loves me.
Yes.
If I love this kid, I'm like watching these shows at night. I was watching this show Courageous. It was this movie Courageous. My wife was in the room. It was like 2:00 in the morning. I'm like rocking and watching this movie. I'm like just bawling.
boy.
It was like
the feelings.
Yeah, I'm like watching The Lion King. Like, oh my goodness, it was
is
so tender.
Stephen.
But it's like so natural.
My husband, it's sweet. He can't help but tell anybody who's newly married. He'll just say, I just got to tell you what it means to have a baby.
Yeah.
And
well, wouldn't you say that's another assumption, that we expect it to not be messy?
yes.
We expect it to not be
difficult for us. Like sometimes we don't love them.
Inconvenient.
Yeah.
Inconvenient.
Yes.
We want to come home to the house and not have any inconvenience, right? And that's
And
not
the
case.
reality is, your body, you know that when you got little people sitting on you who want to take
yeah.
over your home,
Yeah,
there is no
yeah.
personal space.
Like, don't touch me.
yeah,
Yeah,
it's
like what are you doing? Like, touching your food. Like you just touched a duck.
So,
You know what I mean?
oh,
Anyway.
it is. Oh, well, it's why when we look at the data, married parents are the happiest. And they would not say it's because life is easier, right? It's not like convenient. And lots of things in a sense become more complicated. You don't just go out to eat wherever you want to and whenever you want to travel or right, all these things. Your life is a different place. And even the pain and sorrow of watching children suffer and make choices that can be painful to us, right? It would be easier to close off your heart in a sense and just go on and take care of your own pleasure.
And maybe that's what we do.
And I think that's where we are. But the meaning is gone, right? At the same level. And I think appreciating, don't you love all the people who are in your children's life who bless them in ways you can't as the parent?
Yeah, you need to fill those gaps. Yeah.
I am so desperate for people who are like single people that don't have children who bless my children in ways I cannot do that.
That's right.
And so it is like this whole effort, and they will, the destiny of all the children of God, if we choose, is marriage and children eternally, is that most meaningful experience of love that our heavenly parents have all the time. They want us to have, and that is the destiny for all. But what a gift to have us working together, whether or not it's through our own biological children, working together to help build the rising generation, because it's the deepest investment we can make, right?
Well, can I bring you, and this might be too personal. I don't know, you can answer it or not.
Yeah.
Because you were married when you were 34.
Yes.
What were those feelings like for you? Because
Yes.
maybe you had some of these expectations that weren't met right away according to your timetable.
Huge yearnings.
And because I can just imagine that somebody's watching this right now thinking like, well, that's not me right now. You felt that way before. I
Huge
felt
yearnings.
it. I was 28, 34. It doesn't really matter what the age is.
Yes.
What was it like for you?
Yeah. I spent a lot of time like, did I end up on the wrong train? I have my 10 siblings. All of them got married at what seemed like a normal
what number
time.
are you?
5th.
So you're
I'm
in the middle.
And everyone after me is getting married.
Before and after, you're like,
yes,
where did they go?
Yes. And I would have this feeling like I ended up on the wrong train. Like, what happened? What did I do? And what's sweet, Stephen, because those are really real yearnings, really deep yearnings in your heart that only God, I think, can understand fully, the loneliness and yearning. But I love that I could play a role in the relationships with my nieces and nephews. I could travel to help my siblings in ways they couldn't because they had their own families they were taking care of. And I cannot tell you how meaningful those memories are for me. The ways that I could become part of other people's lives that were unique because I didn't yet have my own children and husband. But what I love too, I just heard a single sister, she's 34, stood up and bore her testimony and said, what a powerful gift the temple has been in her yearnings to marry and have her own children. Because the temple is all about binding us. And when we participate in temple work, we are binding ourselves to others in the most meaningful of way. 100% it will be more deeply fulfilled within our own marriages that are our destiny to have and children. But as a single person, you're looking around and you're realizing, oh, these married people are struggling, right?
Yeah.
They are struggling too.
Do you see that kid? They need to get their kid.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
They're struggling. And so certainly we're all growing and developing, and that is our destiny to have those kind of families. And the temple just plays such a central role in helping us know we belong, we are bound. There are thousands we are sealed to who watch over us.
Yes.
There are thousands and millions to come after us that we will have, that we will be bound to and sealed to. And there's just no question we belong. We belong. We are part of, we are bound in there, whether or not we are married yet. We are bound in that eternal family.
So that connection in the temple is so vital.
It
was vital for you.
Vital for me. Vital for me. And I think I love every time there's a new temple announced, there's more people who will have that sense of I belong and nothing can take me from this eternal family that I am part of. And I am helping seal it together. I am helping bind it together whether or not I'm married yet. I am part of that work of binding this family, this eternal family together.
In the gathering, in the work of salvation on both sides of the veil. What are there any other misconceptions for considering the idea of the characteristics of the ideal? Because I think you look on on TV, you watch, movies. It's like the mom in the 50s with their apron on, just running the car. See you later, honey. Right?
Yeah.
And they go off to work. He shows up, and we almost imagine that the celestial kingdom is that, right?
Oh, yikes!
Husband comes home, and he's got his briefcase, and he's come.
Yeah.
What are there any other I don't want to say dangers, but any misconceptions about the ideal?
Well, I think we have to unpack gender just quickly. And,
okay.
and you've been trying to get us there. So no,
not really.
Let's unpack that whole thing, because I think the problem with roles, right? This notion of this is what she does, this is what he does, is we can see them, they can be used to constrain us in ways that limit development, that limit the expansion. They can be used in ways that just we collapse into without choosing and acting. They can obscure the power of motherhood and fatherhood and limit it by the way it looks. Does it mean to be a dad? You come home, newspaper up, mom serves you food, right? That might be what we take away from 1950s. 100%, the work of God is what we call equal partnership in marriage. And what that looks like is we are bound together in a work that is bigger than both of us, in nurturing, protecting, presiding, providing for this life as the most significant work in our lives. And it is an equal partnership thing. Now, the challenge in the world has been, do you have to be the same to be equal?
Okay.
So this obscuring of any differences. So I'll have students say, right, they've been taught every difference between a man and a woman that's assumed is socially constructed. There's nothing real in that. We just created and constructed those things as a society. 100% we participate in creating ideas about what it means to be a man and a woman in society. But also, at our core, we are physiologically distinct. We are dimorphic. There's two forms of human divine beings, male and female. And what we see at the very beginning of creation in Adam and Eve is them put on the earth together. That the whole purpose of the creation was to have a place where this man and woman could come together to create a oneness that they could not experience without the other, a completion. The fall enabled them to create life together, coming together in a oneness. And the children that came from their union carried the literal stamp of their beings on them. And then the atonement is about enabling that complete oneness between man and woman, eternal life forever, sealed together in the eternal family of God through that sacred unit. So there's something about this dimorphic form of male and female that matters tremendously, that is the divine image. So we see Elohim is a plural word.
That's right. Abraham says the gods.
The gods, yes.
Yeah.
And you get this sense that when the creation happened, the Lord tells us, in the image of God, he created them, male and female. That God itself, the meaning of God, is male and female. There is no God except there is no God except it be defined as male, female oneness, that creative power that allows for life. And so I think when we think about what God is, it is male and female, that form together. An interesting story, there was this powerful conference at the Vatican, the Symposium on the Family, some years ago, 2015.
Yeah.
Do you remember hearing about this?
President Eyring went to it, right?
President Eyring went.
Yeah, he spoke at it.
He spoke at it. He was invited, assigned by the First Presidency. The fantastic religious leaders, brilliant religious leaders from all over the world participated in that conference. And I wanted to be there, wasn't invited, but I'm tracking the news from it. And President Eyring spoke. It was remarkable, Stephen, because out the news comes that this was the most powerful message given at that remarkable symposium. His message.
They said that it was the most powerful.
And the way they described it, it was absolutely silent in that room. And let me tell you what he did.
What did he say?
His whole focus was on what the meaning of his and his wife's union had meant in their lives, in the lives of their children. And tearfully, he described, our complementarity has been more than I ever could have imagined. Her nurturing grew in me as my presiding and leadership grew in her. And whatever words he would have used to describe their differences, he's just saying, hers grew in me and mine grew in her. And what it meant to their children as they passed on this oneness together in this nurturing, blessing, presiding, protecting of life. It was absolutely silent in that room because everyone could palpably feel the meaning of this coming together, male and female, what it does to us as adults, what it does to the children who come from that union.
I love that idea that we assume maybe that I have this role.
Yes.
My wife has this role.
Yes.
And she does this, I do this.
Yes, and they can't cross.
And they can't cross
right, yes.
paths. But I love what you include with President Eyring. That is really, I can see that in my own marriage. The things that my wife naturally have, the nurturing,
yes.
her example of nurturing,
yes.
my children not only learn it, but I do too.
Yes.
And she can learn that from
yes.
me.
The uniqueness you bring.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so with this all being together, the ideal we've been talking about, right? What happens if the ideal doesn't exist? Meaning, obviously, it is a good standard to have.
Yes.
But what's the opposite of that? If we don't have this as the standard,
yes.
What happens in society? What happens in families? What happens in, you even mentioned there's an economic effect of family. What is the opposite? Yes.
So let's talk through that, and then I'll share like a spiritual principle about that, because the truth is, like we've already said, we all have gaps, right?
Yeah.
In those things. So just to illustrate the power of this oneness in mother and father that comes together. When an infant's born, a mother, we all know, experiences a flood of oxytocin.
Yeah.
It's the bonding hormone. It's essential because that baby emerges from the womb with one task they absolutely have to do. They have to complete, and it's to form a bond with someone they experience as consistent, as responsive, as loving. And they are hardwired to look for a particular person. We all know who that is.
Yeah, mom.
Mom.
Yeah.
And they know her voice. They know her heartbeat. Their cells will remain in her body for the rest of her life.
Really?
There's this transfer of cells in that baby's
It
growing.
remains in the mom.
Remains in the mom. In fact, microchimerism studies show that if that infant, that developing fetus, there's a sense for the heart struggling, that mother, because there's a lot going on blood flow wise for a mother who's carrying life. It's like they sense that heart needs help. And those cells that are not yet fully formed beeline it to her heart and help strengthen her heart.
Me?
Is that remarkable?
The child?
The child
can notice the strain on the mother of carrying of carrying them.
Yes.
And they seek to assist.
Yes. Yes. It's remarkable.
Wow.
Just to show how deeply intimate that relationship is, right? And that intimacy, in a sense, continues. It's why that infant emerges from the womb looking for mother. And so they find what will happen is you'll notice an infant who can barely do anything, lift up their arm, right? Whatever. They will lock eyes with that mother's eyes. And in that body to body, eye to eye, she literally builds the right brain of that baby. A million synapses per second are being connected.
The mother's
looking at that baby, touching that baby, responding to that baby, she will build the right brain. That's the center of emotional well-being. She will regulate the emotions for that baby who doesn't yet have a sense of emotions. She will do the regulating for that baby. So she'll match their state. She'll match their feeling. If they're sad, she'll give a sad face.
That's right.
And then upregulate it. If the baby's happy, she'll upregulate it more. And she is regulating the emotions for that infant as they learn who they are, what feelings are, what meaning is, and lay the foundation for their sense of identity. So like for the first year and a half, that relationship is so powerful.
What would you say though? And I think the natural question would be if someone is adopted.
Yes.
What would you say to that?
Really powerful question, very important question. How can we thank adoptive parents enough? Like I think of the families that I love that have adopted children. There's no question those children are theirs, 100%.
Yeah.
And they form a deep and powerful bond. At the same time, we have to recognize there has been some sense of rupture for that child. It's why many, not all, hunger to know at some point. Even if they don't want to, there can be this inner yearning to know
who the parents are. Who
am I? Like your dad, right? Coming to know his dad as a 16-year-old. There's a sense of incompleteness, if you will, can be, right? Until I know who I come from biologically. And so I think we have to really appreciate this is not an insignificant thing.
Yeah.
This tie, this biological relationship through which life comes about. And so appreciating that, even as we're so grateful for mothers who allow children to be adopted by others who can provide what they cannot provide.
Well, that's what I would say. Because you naturally would think, well, what about that? But then it would even potentially be worse.
Yes.
Right?
Yes,
I think
that's right. A dangerous environment,
the ideal,
not stable.
The ideal again would be the mother because of the naturalness. And I just think it's important to really make sure that we understand that you're saying how powerful it is for it to be the mother.
Yes.
And how important it is that when that can't happen, that there needs to be someone else because it still affects them in positive ways to have that connection from a female.
Yep, that's right. And they form very powerful bonds, right? They're adopted parents absolutely can form very powerful bonds with those children. And in a sense, it has to happen for healthy development, even if it's not with that biological parent. So you might be wondering, well, so what do dads do?
Yeah.
Right? Like, is he just
that's
like...
exactly right.
And all dads have that feeling. They're like, wow, there's something powerful going on there, and I don't know what to do with that, right?
Hey.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Where do I fit, right, in this? So what's amazing is fathers also experience oxytocin. So this is interesting. When he is in the presence of that mother and that baby, he also experiences an increase in the bonding hormone.
When he's just experiencing the mother and the child together.
Yes.
Really?
Yes. Just being in their presence. Isn't that remarkable?
Yeah.
So what you were feeling holding your little boy, you're feeling physiologically, your body is experiencing a flood of oxytocin that is bonding you to that little person. Real. This is what's interesting, that the types of behaviors it tends to elicit are different. So you'll see cooing and cuddling from mothers.
Okay.
Looking into eyes, holding close, protecting, bringing close to the body. And you'll see tickling and tossing in fathers.
Yeah, yeah. With
Same
anyone.
hormone. With it.
Well, I had my nephew and niece over, and even in their young age, both of them would do the same. Like my nephew would just poke at her.
That's so, yes.
Yeah, and then she would just want to just be. And my other niece
Isn't
just
that
wanted to just
interesting?
hold her all the time.
Oh.
And he would just come up and be like, "Hey," he'd just, bloop, 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 and he just leave. Yeah.
So Stephen, it's amazing
It's
because
interesting.
fathers tend to have, so mothers have a relationship that's characterized by this closeness, by laying the foundations for identity. Fathers have a relationship that's characterized by more stimulatory kinds of actions.
Yeah.
Physical. And that's important. So when we come home from the hospital with our baby, she's 6 pounds, she's tiny. And that night I'm seeing Mike do calisthenics with her. And I'm like, what are you doing?
You got to get the gas out.
There you
That's
go.
what he's doing.
That's
Yeah.
what he's doing.
Yeah.
And he just had this sense. This is a man who had no younger siblings, right? This is the first diaper he's ever changed is hers. He has no one he grew up with babies. No one around
naturally.
him. It was just part of him. The other thing he would do is he would hold her like a football, starting 4 to 6 months old, right? And we noticed that about fathers, and it's really interesting. What they're doing is they're giving a child a view of the outside world that they have. Mothers tend to bring close, hold within, and fathers tend to give that baby that outside view. And we know from data that fathers have a powerful impact on how children relate to the outside world. So their understanding of boundaries, of what's appropriate, what's not good to do. So we know, for example, that dads tend to do more play roughhousing with kids.
Which is important.
Super important because it's helping them learn how to regulate heightened emotions in a way that's controlled. So it's linked to children having stronger peer capacities. Is that interesting?
Yeah. They're interrelational skills.
Yes. So as children age, fathers are also the ones that tend to call them names more.
That's
or
right.
tease them,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, it's true.
And moms are like, stop it, knock it off, right? Yeah. And it's as if dads have a sense, I want to help them figure out how to navigate this outside world. So we'll find fathers tend to promote independence. They push independence. They're the one to be like, get your own backpack on, make your own lunch.
That's what I think. Like, they need to wake up and make their own breakfast.
There you go.
Come on. Yeah, I'm serious.
And so this is all in the research.
But my wife was like, oh,
they won't eat or whatever.
Yeah.
So we'll see Andrew Doucet's in Canada doing work with stay-at-home dads. She sees dads lunch. Make your own lunch. She sees stay-at-home moms. What kind of sandwich do you want? Cheese or peanut butter, right? Yeah. And she's looking at him and she's thinking, get engaged, dads, right? Like these selfish dads, not right.
But the dad wants to maybe develop that side, help with that development.
This is exactly what she notices. She's like, nurturing is both holding close and it's letting go. And fathers seem to be particularly attuned to developing the capacities for children to figure life out, which they have to have. So we know, for example, that moms tend to correct more often. They tend to, don't do that, do that, do that. Dads tend not to correct as often. But when dad does, the line holds. He's less flexible in carrying out the consequences of something. And it's like dads have this sense, they're more willing to confront a child and say, don't do this. The line holds, there's a sense of consequence, which shows up right when we see that fatherlessness is linked to incarceration rates.
For either side, girls and boys?
Mostly for boys, because what we find out with boys and dads is without a dad, there can be problematic behaviors that develop. So high risk behaviors.
Like that, is it more from the seeking to have the connection? Or?
I think yes. And I think a lack of sense of what healthy masculinity looks like, right? Oh. So it's acting out, right? Maybe as unresolved or pain, a searching for a relationship that wasn't there, not having a model of what it looks like. What does it mean to be protective of women and children and show that form of masculinity? And so there can be compensatory masculinity, right? Like I'm going to show that I'm a man by being aggressive, by being over people, instead of seeing what it looks like to have beautiful, healthy masculinity, which is protective of children, which is protective of those who are weaker. So you see that in boys. In girls, that broken relationship with dad is linked to a couple of things. One is an increased likelihood of depression.
Really?
So rather than acting out, there's an internalizing issue going on. But also her sexual trajectory. So painful research, but Bruce Ellis would find and conclude, Paul Rayburn writing about it would say, a father's closeness to his daughter sets her reproductive trajectory.
Whoa. Are you serious?
Remarkable. So what he's meaning is the likelihood of a girl engaging in more dangerous or risky sexual behaviors is dramatically increased when she has not experienced the closeness of a relationship with a father.
Why do you think that is? Wait.
So it would be interesting. I'm sure you have thoughts about it, Stephen. Lots of people have thought about, it seems like it's almost as if the love of a father, and it's his being present in the family, married, but also his closeness to her, gives her a sense of what masculinity feels like, that is truly loving, that's not interested in taking advantage sexually.
Oh, I see. It's like a foundation.
A foundation. Almost like she walks outside of that house with like an armor, in a sense. I know who I am. I know what love feels like, that is truly interested. And I don't have to seek for something that's a distorted form of that, which I think can happen, right, in this quest to find male love. Where is true male love? Can lead her on a path that's more risky. So fathers matter.
A lot.
A lot.
A lot. And just the statistics that you mentioned at the beginning. It just makes me think, I can't help but think back to all of the, half of the people have parents. And it's like, it's hard to not to see that. I don't know if it would be more of a causation or a correlation, right, of the state of our world, the state of our country, the state of our lives, right? Yes. Because of these gaps that are presented in the world. Yep. So the daughter, the presence of a dad, it affects their internal, what's the word you used? Their clock, their sense. Oh yeah, reproductive. Their reproductive trajectory. Well, no, I remember in some of the research that I studied. Yeah. Wasn't it the fact that even girls who have fathers that are not at home, yes, or that they have the absence of a father, yes, they start puberty sooner. Yes. They'll say, what's up with that? So having another male move in who's non-biologically related. Is that what it was? Can seem, it's like through pheromones, people think, like it elicits development in her earlier. Whoa. Isn't that remarkable? So there's like a biological, a physiological, and emotional reality, right, to these ties. Wow. I know. There's a lot to unpack. But is it mostly that the daughter, when the father is there and it's her father, yes, it's almost like she doesn't need to elicit that. Yes. And then now you have a male who's not her genetic father. Yes. It almost would be like another male to some degree. Yes. And so she feels like she needs to. Yes. Wow. Yeah. I think there's so much to it that we don't even understand, right? That's why having the blessings of the gospel of Jesus Christ, it's so beautiful. You know, my husband's parents divorced when he was 6, and he wondered, could he ever have a stable family? Could he ever have, be married to someone from a stable family, that kind of thing. And the power of religious faith in our lives to transform our capacity to have beautiful, stable, loving relationships. It's like that is the fruit of the gospel of Jesus Christ, to help us become people who can create, maintain, develop stable, loving family relationships. That's the whole essence of it. Wow. So there is a huge connection between the father and the mother. Yes. We've mentioned many of those. Yes. And you could probably give tons and tons of different examples. But the overall, yes, the actual development of a child is essential to have a father and a mother. That's the ideal. Yeah. We know that there are gaps. Yes. With your husband, for example, yes, his parents were divorced. Some people, I even think, like you look in the Book of Mormon, the sons of Helaman, their fathers died. Yes. Right? Right. And so there needs to be something to fill in the gap. Yeah. I want to go back to that question again, because I think again, we almost want this connection. We long for this connection.
Yes.
I feel like we are beings that need connection. And we mentioned how we both have Stephen Tager.
Yeah.
He told me this story once of a boy who was in one of his classes, and he said that his mom, he had everything, right?
Yeah.
He lived
all
in
you
this,
could ask for.
all
Yeah.
you could ever ask
Yeah.
for. And he said, at night, if I'm lucky, my parents would get on the intercom and they would say, I love you.
Wow.
If I was lucky. He said, I would rather live in a hut, a 1-bedroom hut.
Wow.
Because then at least at night when I'm going to sleep, my parents would
Yes.
have to look at me in my eyes and tell me that they love me.
Wow. So powerful.
And I wonder if like maybe that's what really is what's at stake
Yes.
is that loneliness that we.
Well, I was just thinking as you're talking, here's David Brooks, gifted writer, New York Times writer, prizes, awards. He describes being in a Manhattan apartment with everything on the cusp of receiving another great award. He comes home to an empty apartment. He had not eaten dinner with anyone in some time. Recently divorced, children have left the home. And he ends up, that experience transforms him. He ends up writing his next book, The Second Mountain, just about this whole false focus on meritocracy, on achievement, on getting pleasure, and what life really means. What is it that really, as you described from Stephen's story, right? What is it that really gives meaning? So he just recently wrote in response to the marriage data about it being connected to happiness. He just said, it makes me want to take young people by the lapels and tell them, do not ignore the importance of these relationships. Marriage may not come to you, but don't let it be because you didn't care about it. And then he says, because every good thing flows from the strength of relationships. Okay, so that leads to the question, what about when it doesn't happen?
Yeah.
What about the beautiful missionary who's serving with my parents in Ukraine? Didn't know his dad. Grew up in the South, single mother, never knew his dad. People would ask him about his dad, and he always said, I have a father. My Father in heaven is my father. And he would tell them, right, as a missionary, sharing the gospel, what it meant to him to have a knowledge of a perfect Father in heaven who loved him. And the amazing thing is, Stephen, that our heavenly parents didn't just send us down to earth with like a list. You know, they could have just said, here's the Beatitudes, right? Go be good. You know, here's the Savior's teachings on the Sermon on the Mount, good instructions, follow these and you'll have a good life. And it's true, but they didn't just send us with those. They sent us, as President Nelson has so powerfully illuminated, with covenant relationship. And so all through the Old Testament, we hear that truth. I will never leave you.
From the beginning.
From the beginning, I am bound to you. You belong to me. I am yours and you are mine. And so you hear this covenant relationship that is the answer to it all, because in fact, we all need healing. Healing comes through relationship. The mortal relationships we experience will be fractured. There will be brokenness to them because human beings are learning. But we have that relationship from a perfect being, God our Father, and his Son, Jesus Christ, who took upon himself our experience so that he could, like a mother, match us and upregulate us, match our emotional state, regulate it for us, heal it, empower us, strengthen us. And when we're safe in that place, nothing can harm us, right? Permanently. When we are safe in that relationship with him.
Yeah. When we have that connection with him, is that what you're saying?
Yes.
We don't get as affected. We're not as pulled to worry or wonder about these other things when we have that foundation with him.
Yes. Yep.
Is that what you're saying?
Don't you love how I love that idea that sin is our way of managing pain?
Ooh.
It's our way of like addressing the hollowness, addressing the fracturing in us. And so we turn to other things.
When we're really trying to find, was it President Kimball?
I think you're saying, here's President Nelson, right? Who says like, we turn
To Christ.
Yes, he is the way, and the sin is our turning away from him. So addiction kind of becomes a replacement, right? That harms us because it
Well, who was was it President? I think it was President Kim. I can't remember, but basically, like, every sin is an attempt to meet an unmet need.
Yes, you are right.
We're trying to numb some type of pain.
Yes.
And we're trying to get the opposite of the pain with this thing and trying to fill this gap, right?
Yes.
Interesting.
Get control or get pleasure or find some way to address it. And God stands there and says, I am here to heal you with a power that's infinite. Anything else will not lead to healing. It can't create. It can't do the kintsugi for us. It can't bind us up. It can't, fill that lacquer in the brokenness that leads to beautiful healing. Only Christ can do that.
I love that connection. Even the way that he describes himself to bear our burdens. And that's, I don't know, like Elder Holland's talk that he mentioned about Behold Thy Mother. Is that the name of the talk? I can't remember the name of the talk. And he compares it as, and I feel like both male and female have those similar attributes in different ways, where bearing burdens, right? To be born again, to be baptized, like in Moses chapter 5 or 6, I think it's 6, where he talks about it's through the blood and the Spirit. Your first breath you take in your mother's womb, right? And through her blood, you're born into this world. And then through the blood and the Spirit of Christ, that's how we enter back into the presence of God. But I feel like it's still this same covenant connection that we have that gives us assurance when we choose to be in covenant with him.
Yes. Oh, that's so powerful.
Right?
And it's family language. Isn't that amazing?
Yeah, it's family language is what I'm trying to get at. Yeah.
Reborn is like being born, right? And
family language.
Wow. It's because it's real. It is bound up in this family covenant relationship that is real. And the power comes through the strength of those relationships. The power to change, all of that is that deeper. I mean, it's like God, the strongest metaphor he can use is marriage, right?
That's right.
Bound to the church, right? Is marriage.
He's the bridegroom.
He is the bridegroom. And the other metaphor is that giving birth, bearing new life, right? Blood and water, those strongest metaphors, because family is the core purpose, meaning, right? It is what defines, blesses, helps. So I love it. It's so true. You pulled out, here's the Savior. How could he best describe the intimacy of his relationship with us? It's drawing on those metaphors of being born.
That we naturally have those yearnings for connection. And I remember, because I was talking with Ty Mansfield, and you had mentioned this before.
Yes.
You can't belong.
Yes.
You can't, until you belong to him. It's like, I can't remember how he said it. It's almost like it's hard to belong to anyone else if you don't belong to him first.
Yes.
Right?
Yes, so powerful. Maybe because our heavenly parents are in us. And to turn away from them is to reject who we are. But when we are true in that core, then we can belong to others. We can love others. We can give.
We don't need to posture.
Yes.
We don't need to pretend because we have more of an assurance, I think. I think a lot of it is that, right?
Yes.
The assurance that it brings.
You know, Ty quotes Tim Keller, who we both love. He's a
Tim Keller.
Wonderful. Tim Keller died just a year ago. Is such a loss. But he'll have this statement where he says, "To be loved but not known is comforting but superficial." I think my children sometimes feel that from me. Mom, you tell me you love me, but do you know me? Are you willing to know me? Then he adds, "To be known but not loved is our greatest fear." That is rejection. But to be truly loved and fully known is, well, a lot like being loved by God. It is what we need more than anything. And he'll say it takes us out of our posturing. It takes us out of our need to pursue other things to fill, because we know we are known and loved and seen fully by God.
Wow.
That's so beautiful.
And I love thinking, it makes me think of the covenant that we can talk about, right, in the temple, right? It's sacrifice, obedience and sacrifice, the law of the gospel, chastity. We always think of that maybe in the context of, but he's a part of the covenant too. No other gods before him. And then to willingly choose to give everything. And that's what he did. And that's what he's inviting us to do in our covenant relationships. The commandments are societal, right? They're not just, it's almost like we assume that I'm just going to be hanging out with God and like our heavenly parents, just me, I made a mistake. Oh, they're mad at me. It's like they affect other people, right?
And the healing is not just individual, but it's like communal.
It is.
Right? The atonement is a communal thing that acts through us with one another and also on us as an individual.
There's nothing that I could ever do that will not affect, I can do it in my closet alone. And it still affects other people.
So
I don't care
remarkable.
what anybody says. Right? And he always knows about it, you know?
Yes, we are that bound together, right?
Yeah. And when we do damage, it can be repaired.
Yes.
That's the covenant that he's been making with us from the very beginning, that he promised Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden, that he wanted to be back in their presence. He wants to be, what is it, in Doctrine and Covenants 84, Moses, he had a desire to sanctify his people so that they might see the face of God and live. And isn't that the role of every parent, to do that, to help prepare their children together with their spouse to make it back to the presence of God, right?
I love when Carrie Mulestein will just say all of his study in the Old Testament about the Abrahamic covenant over years, he said, it came so clear, God wants to be in relationship with us. He yearns to be with us in the fullest sense of that. And when I say God, I mean God our Father and God our Mother, who are one, and that they yearn to be with us in fullness. They can't be with us in fullness until we become like them. As we become like them, as we know them, as we experience divine law and live it, then we have ever greater communion with them. And it's everything. Like it's what we just yearn for, the fullness of oneness with them and oneness with one another. So it's so beautiful, right? In section 76, as Joseph and Sydney are shown the celestial sphere, that language, how it describes the intimacy of the celestial sphere, where we see as we are seen and know as we are known. That is heaven, to love at that level.
That's exactly what that Tim Keller quote is similar.
I think it's exactly what Tim's
describing.
Isn't
the same principle?
Yes.
It's the same.
Yes. That intimacy, that level of love is where God is leading us.
Wow. And even in worst case scenario, right? Baptismal covenant.
Yes.
Well, let's say there are fatherless children.
Yes.
Our covenant with God is to mourn with those that mourn and comfort those that stand in need of comfort.
Yes.
To be witnesses of God at all times and in all things and in all places.
Yes.
Right? And I feel like that fills in the gaps. His when you've done it unto one of the least of these, my brethren, you have done it unto me. Right? He expects us to be the vessel, right? To be his hands,
his heart, to love, to fill in, right? To bring his love to fill in those gaps.
So what would you say for husband, wife, men and women, dad, mom, wife, husband? Understanding a deeper understanding of this covenantal responsibility. Not just in their family, but in society. How can we paint a picture for what does a mom look like that's doing that? What does a father look like that's doing that?
Oh, isn't that beautiful? I was just thinking as you were talking, there's this remarkable moment when Dietrich Bonhoeffer, who's the remarkable German theologian, put in prison for his efforts to stop the Nazi regime. He ends up dying in prison. But we have letters that he wrote from prison through remarkable means to family members. One was a niece getting married. And he describes, Elder Christofferson quotes this, he describes, in your love, you see only your two selves. He's saying to his beautiful niece and her fiance, but your marriage is a post of responsibility to the world. And so when I read that statement and talk to students about what it means to commit oneself to another, to be true, to love, we are changing The whole world is what's happening. Now, what does that look like for a faithful mother and father? Don't you think it looks like, I love how Brene Brown will say, first of all, we're going to see all kinds of imperfections in ourselves. We're going to mess up. And she'll talk about the gifts of imperfection that can come into the lives of our children because we keep showing up. We keep getting back in the ring. We apologize. We bear witness of the Savior's power to redeem us and them. We show up again and try our best to teach what we know. We try to pull the weeds out, as Elder Uchtdorf said so powerfully, to make way for the flowing, living water of Christ to go into their lives. And then he says, and we stand back and we watch God's miracles in their lives. Wow. Now that might take faith, like Alma's parents, to watch his conversion. Probably 40 years, this young man who became a man and was still struggling so much. It took great faith. But if we'll hold to Christ as parents, his power, we're promised through temple covenants, will flow through us into the lives of our children. And we're going to make mistakes. We're going to need the redemption of the Savior every day. We're going to need to know he will redeem me in my imperfections. He'll redeem me in my sins, in my not loving more perfectly. He'll redeem me in my yelling sometimes and impatience. And right, he will do that, and he will do that for them. And I'm going to keep showing up in the ring and trying again, trusting his power in my life and theirs.
Wow. I can't imagine you yelling, to be honest. I mean,
just ask my kids. They'll be, this morning.
No. Well, what I mean is, I was thinking this literally yesterday. How do you apply the atonement of Jesus Christ in your life? And somebody was speaking during
testimony meeting.
And I was like, I don't think it's this like formula. I think it's you live like you believe it.
Oh, isn't that beautiful?
Do you know what I'm saying?
Yes.
You live as a parent like you actually believe him. Like you actually, and it changes in every circumstance. But it's like, what would my life be like if I responded in this circumstance like I actually believed in the atonement of Jesus Christ? That I actually believed that he would redeem it. That I actually believed that he would come and that he can take everything away. Do you know what I mean? Which
is why covenant is so powerful, because I think for me as a mother, it was so like horrifying to see myself, right? Yelling sometimes and impatient and loving imperfectly. Like it was, and to think his covenant relationship, and I think what you described so powerfully for me, it removes the shame that blocks us from loving. Because if we act like we believe, right? We can get away from the business of trying to prove that we're always lovable and that we're somehow good and that we fit and that we're the perfect parent. We get out of that rat race and we can join God in the work of loving because he redeems me. Instead of trying to always, right, like I'm not good enough and I failed and right, trying to prove we're okay. He says, quit worrying about it. I'll redeem you. Just join me in the work of loving.
I love what you said in your talk to BYU. You said, we sometimes act like, if I'm perfect, I don't need to use the atonement.
Yes.
That's ridiculous. He is a redeemer, and he means what he says, that he can redeem us, We're not supposed to use it, but we do this, right?
Yes.
So, okay, parents are living better like this, right? I mean, obviously living with mistakes, relying on the Redeemer on a daily basis, repenting daily, like President Nelson says, acknowledging his ability to save us.
Yes.
But how does the world change? What does the world look like now when people start to live this way?
Wow, isn't that so beautiful? How I remember going to Madagascar to pick up my brother from his mission, so impoverished. And we went into a home. There was no electricity, no running water, but it was made of cement. And this remarkable man invited us in to have family home evening with his daughters and wife. They lit a candle on the little broken box that was in front of us. We sang together, Love at Home. They had just learned it. And they spoke of what had happened in their home because of the gospel of Jesus Christ. That he had come to understand what it meant to be a father, to lead his family in family prayer. He'd come to understand what it meant to love and preside in righteousness. He'd come to see the value of his children, that they were going to the temple. They had no idea how could they pay for it, but they were going to the temple to be bound together eternally. And all I can say is, from that little tiny hovel on a remote island in the world, light and love was radiating, and it changes everything around. So the more we have families lit by the light of the restored gospel of Jesus Christ, lit by covenant relationship, what could be more powerful in this world?
Wow. We could talk for days about this. And I think that this really gives me a lot to think about, a lot. I end every episode this way. I believe that what you said is true, but don't take our word for it. It's up to you to find out for yourself. This is Let's Get Real. Until next time.